Star Trek is horrible. Or at least it has been for years. Ever since Star Trek Discovery, or I'll say since the end of Star Trek Beyond, because the Abrams films were the last good thing to be produced in the Star Trek franchise. But this show has just lowered our standards so much for what Star Trek is supposed to be. I was watching another person who reviews Star Trek Discovery, Mecha Random 42, and I don't agree with every opinion she has, but that's not supposed to. But she made a good point. Melting water is too thinky, and that just kind of breaks everything about Star Trek Discovery down to its simplest form. It's too thinky, or in this case, it's not. Star Trek is too thinky for Star Trek Discovery, for Alex Kurtzman and his vision of Star Trek. Star Trek is a very brainy show. I won't say it is like the most scientific and most what's the term people like to use besides not intellectual, but basically Star Trek has always taken some amount of thought. The structure of the show, the development of the characters, the science that goes into it, even if it is fake or pseudoscience for the sake of sci-fi, it is generally fairly consistent within Star Trek. And it is well thought out as to why it works the way it does. You see, this is the difference between Star Trek and, say, Star Wars. And this is not a argument about which one's better, it's just a fact. Star Wars is fantasy in space. Things just work because they do. Lightsabers are just lightsabers, laser swords. Hyperdrive just happens. The Force just happens because it does. They're just a mechanic to move the story along and enjoy, the action and the adventure. Star Trek has always been about why do these things work. The people who watch it want to know why these things work, and Star Trek has explained it. Whether it's warp drive or deflector shields or comm badges or whatever, science and technology and why these things work are in fact integral parts of sci-fi, the sci-fi that is Star Trek. It's not just Spock saying, "I like science," or Tilly saying, "This is the power of math, people." You can preach these things all day, but you don't execute them on screen. You don't make it happen. And not only that, but the patronization of it, as if Spock is the one interested in science, or Tilly is the one that is interested in math. Well, this is Star Trek. These characters on these ships, they all are. That's just a normal thing. Even a captain like Picard knows a lot about science and the technology and the engineering that he works around, because he has to. That's the nature of being a Starfleet officer. You don't need a promotional STEM video going on, for the crew of the ship to be interested in Star Trek, or sorry, in science. It's quite silly, actually, and very patronizing. But then you also, throughout Star Trek, you've always had very intriguing, deep character interactions and the characters themselves. You have stories where you get to know these people as if they're like real people that have intricate or complex storylines to their lives, and it draws you closer to them. But they also don't talk and act like contemporary people that you deal with. Like the terminology that Star Trek characters use, like the crew of the Enterprise or Voyager or Deep Space Nine, whatever it is. They all speak and act in kind of a timeless way. They don't talk or use lingo and slang and terminology that fits whatever the modern era is, because these people are several hundred years in the future. They wouldn't talk like us. And on top of that, they're supposed to be a more socially evolved form of us. And these are also Starfleet people. These are people that are members of a space navy. You know, whatever your most utopian visions of Star Trek and Starfleet are from Star Trek The Next Generation, even then, Starfleet is a military. It is a bunch of heavily armed ships in space that do exploration, that have a ranking structure and a military naval structure to command these vehicles and to defend their interests, the interests of the Federation, and so forth. Discovery just doesn't seem to understand that at all. Alex Kurtzman and his writers don't seem to understand this at all. Their characters constantly, they're basically like Tumblr millennials in space. You know, they constantly are using terminology and slang and the structures of speech and communication that we have today, which honestly is a terrible standard to keep. And socially and emotionally, they act like the worst of millennials. You know, these people have the emotional quotient of a puddle, and they're all supposed to be working in cohesion on a spaceship, a starship, saving the galaxy, facing like some of the most dangerous situations they anybody could encounter. No, it doesn't work. You know, there was a little bit apparently of self awareness in the current season when Starfleet put an observer on Discovery, the future Starfleet. And she made some comment about how, man, you all basically, how none of these people are like very nice to each other and very unprofessional, and how do they even survive? Oh, we make it work. No, bull crap. They're trying to pull this whole, oh, we're like a dysfunctional family, but we find a way to make it work in the end. It's stupid. No, you're a crew of a space navy, a military vessel. You're supposed to be professionals, adults, highly trained professionals on a starship. And does this all seem like nitpicking and taking things too seriously? Well, yes it is, but Star Trek takes itself seriously. That's what sets it apart from a lot of other sci-fi. Is it does take these things seriously. Is it Battlestar Galactica? No, of course not. But it is Star Trek, and Star Trek has always, characters respect each other, even if they don't necessarily like each other, or if they're annoyed by each other. There's still respect shown. There's respect shown for the chain of command, for the structure of the world that they work within. And there's also a different level of intelligence shown, and these people also act like grown adults. Again, I like using the term Tumblr millennials, because that's how they act. They act like a bunch of teenagers in adult bodies who never finished their emotional development. And let's not even start with Michael Burnham being the ultimate Mary Sue, and I hate using that term very often, but she is. She can cause mutinies. She can cause massive, galactic scale wars, or whatever, with the Klingons. And this person shouldn't even be in Starfleet. She should be in a prison cell somewhere. And yet, she somehow constantly can disobey orders, can cause problems for everybody around her, and there's no consequence. So, the show is just horrible. But what's worse is the fans who are so thirsty to have modern Star Trek, to have new Star Trek, that they're willing to take it. And they praise it. And it's like, what is wrong with these people? Like, have a little sense. Have some standards and some class. This is Star Trek we're talking about, the greatest science fiction franchise in history. And we're just gonna let it slide down the drain because we get new shiny stuff. It's sad.